What's up, guys? Ben here, bringing you another video today. Week 1 of the Major 5 qualifiers just completed. I'm recording this on Monday morning. As always, on Mondays, we do these tier lists. So let's take a look at where things stand with the rankings after a fun set of qualifiers as we get ready for our last major event of the season before champs. All right, so if you're new here, let me explain how this works. We have 4 tiers. I don't do the letter ranking stuff. I think it's kind of whack. I think it kind of comes too subjective. I find that this sort of puts teams in more fair boxes. We got Sunday regulars, which are like top 3, top 4 teams. Again, Sunday regular means you're going to make it to Sunday, and that's top 4 in CDL. Central contenders is sort of the rest of the top 8, where we could potentially split this into 2. But the way that it's worked out this season is the 5 or 6 teams that are usually in this category all kind of flop on a given week. And it just comes down to sort of the parity and nature of the CDL at the moment. Work to do is the teams recently have been on the bubble for champs. When we started out this year, they were like teams that were maybe on the cusp of a roster change. The missing pieces were teams that definitely need a roster change at this point. Just the teams that aren't going to make it to champs. Let's be candid. So let's start at the bottom for this episode. We got Florida, LAG, and London. I think Florida is in a good spot ahead of LAG and London, considering they just beat LAG this weekend. That was the only match they played, so not really much else to say. It was a game 5 gruely. Florida looked good. I mean, it was whatever, bro. It was what it was. Tip Florida for winning, but I still think they're, still going to have their issues. It becomes a case of where we want to put LAG and London. London has won recently as of the Major 4 qualifiers. They lost twice to Rocker and New York after that. And LAG has been on this mega slide and, didn't have the best of times this weekend. They got Kentucky fried by FAZE. Trying to remember if any of the maps against FAZE were close. I don't think they were. And then Florida obviously beat them. So I may swap London in front of LAG just because, London actually won a match recently. These two teams play each other next weekend. So I guess we'll adjust the ranking after that, maybe. I don't know. But that's how I'm going to leave it for now. Next up, we have the work to do category. And I'm actually going to potentially move a bunch of teams down here. Because I think there are a number of teams now in this sort of potential contenders work to do category that are kind of borderline. So the 2 teams that I think are borderline right now are Seattle and Minnesota. Now, how we order them gets kind of interesting. I would personally right now, in terms of form, put Vegas in front of both. And you might be thinking I'm crazy. Well, Vegas had 2 game 5s this weekend. They probably should have beat OPTIC, and they beat New York. I thought Vegas had a really good weekend, and now this is 3 series in a row they've had that have gone to game 5, and they got revenge on New York, who beat them at the major. I think Vegas's form recently has been really good. I'm actually looking at it right now. Since the middle of the Major 4 qualifiers, they won 1, 2, 3, lost 2. They're 3-3. They're back to being 500, which is solid. I like where Vegas is at, and we'll talk about the other 2 teams now here in a sec. I don't know what it is with Seattle. I think maybe we've been giving them kind of a pass this season because we've been thinking that maybe they'll kind of come good. They had a good start to the season, getting to the grand final. But since then, it's been meh. And I know they won a little bit of a win streak online, but then they got to LAN and FaZe beat them. They kind of barely beat LAG, and then they lost and got reversed by Rocker. And then this weekend, they had a series against Toronto, and they looked completely lifeless in that series. So don't really know what to think of this Seattle team. They play OPTIC, Boston, New York, and Vegas the rest of the split, and I can really see them going 1-4. So that's not ideal in any stretch of the imagination. I may actually put Rocker ahead of them for now. I really want Seattle to prove me wrong. Rocker this weekend actually not too bad at their event. They clean swept London, and then they got outclassed by a Boston team. Obviously with the Reese Vivid change, and we'll get to that in a minute, playing a little bit better and beat them in 2 hard points and a control. These right now I think are sort of some version of 7, 8, and 9 in the league right now. I don't know if the final qualifications standings for champs may accurately represent where I think these teams rank. And a lot of that has to do with Vegas, just sort of how they have played a majority of the season. But I honestly feel good about Seattle being 9 and Rocker being 8 and Vegas being 7. I think that's kind of where they're sliding. All right, next up we have potential contenders. Boston, I feel pretty comfortable in the 6th spot. They only played 1 game this weekend. And again, it was against Rocker. I want to see more from Boston before I start thinking the best of them. They played Florida, Seattle, FaZe in New York. And the problem for Boston is even if they go 4-1 again, bro, I still want to see these guys, make it kind of super deep on a weekend, make it to a grand final. That's the one hurdle they haven't gotten through yet. They're a solid team, but their decision making and other kind of factors limit them from being a Sunday regular. They're playing good. They may make champs. I did not agree with the sound EQ decision that they made against Rocker on the weekend. I think they were cowards for not agreeing to play without sound EQ. I know they justified it by saying that they need to practice and blah, blah, blah. Bro, if you think you're a good team, take all the cheese out. They weren't willing to do it. They haven't been willing to do it all season. I don't know what else to say, man. It is what it is, but number 6 is where they go. So I'm going to put Toronto ahead of New York. And the big question for me is, do I move Toronto up to Sunday regulars? Now, they had a great weekend, the Toronto Ultra, all things considered. They absolutely fried Seattle. And they played Thieves. Thieves took the first map on them on a pretty mixy fortress. Then from there, Toronto kind of turned it on. Winning the S&D control and hardpoint. Toronto 2-0 on S&D on the weekend, 2-0 on control on the weekend. If Toronto keep this up going to their home event, they're going to be very dangerous and even farther looking ahead to champs. Like they might be running out of shape. They have Optic, LAG, and Rocker, and I can definitely see a role where they go like 4-1 with that schedule. So I think I'm going to move into the 4th spot. I'm going to leave FaZe at 3. We'll get to that in a minute. But I trust Toronto more than I trust these two teams to be 4th. So for now, I'm going to leave it there. We might see some movement over the next couple of weeks, but I feel like we got to tip Toronto for how they're playing right now. We got to give them a little bit of a assumed performance boost in front of their home crowd. They played pretty good last time there was a Toronto event, so I feel good about them sliding in 4. And New York at 5, I think is a pretty fair spot for them this weekend. 2 game 5s. They had one against Vegas on Saturday in which, once again, man, we watched this New York team play S&Ds and they just toss away rounds and advantages and they just make dumb plays. And then they looked a lot cleaner against LA Thieves, beating them in a game 5. So the classic case of New York, man, this team is really good. Case in point, because they won the event early this season. We just haven't seen it consistently from them, especially at a LAN event this weekend. I still like New York. I still like their upside at, say, champs at Major 5, but they're still too day-to-day for me to move them up to Sunday regulars. And they've got a pretty solid schedule coming up. They got LAG, Seattle, and Boston. So LAG should be a dub. Seattle, we'll see. Boston, we'll see. Like New York probably should make winners bracket for this event, but again, they're very day-to-day, and it's hard for me to move them any higher. Look at the Sunday regulars here, and apologies if I had Optic in front of LA Thieves. When we did the last, this is my second take of doing this video, so I kind of already swapped this. So my bad for that. But I'm going to make one change here. I'm going to move Optic in front of LA Thieves. I think Optic after this weekend and the way they played, especially against FaZe, especially against Vegas, kind of grinding that out. I'm going to leave them in that spot. You know, I thought the Vegas series was a little bit iffy, but the first series online coming back from an event can always be, I always give teams a little bit of a pass to an extent on that. And they looked really good against FaZe and they clearly have their number in that spot. It was a comfortable series for Optic other than the S&D. So feel good about Optic. Last hurdle for them, just winning an event. LA Thieves, 0-2 week. Lost to Toronto, lost to New York. We see this with a couple of major winners recently, having a little bit of iffy first weekends. I'm not really sure what to think. The S&D didn't look great this weekend for Thieves. They got to work on that. They do have Florida, Rocker, and London coming up. And London or West Coast, Rocker in Texas, Florida and Florida. I feel like LA Thieves are winning 2 or 3 of those, so they're making winners. And they just got to work on just continuing at the level they're at. The S&D is a little bit of a concern, but we've seen teams kind of have a bad S&D weekend. Hopefully it's not like Toronto Ultra from last split where their S&D is just really garbage for a split. But for now, I'm leaving them at 2 on this list. I think last but not least, we've got FaZe and just a weird weekend for FaZe. And I think it's a team more so than maybe Seattle's the other team that's maybe this self-reflective after this weekend. I don't know what to think of this FaZe team at this point, because in the last couple of matches, going back to the major, they beat Seattle in 4, lost to Thieves in 4, 2 game 5s that they won against New York and Toronto, and they got smoked by Optic, smoked LAG in the first series online, and then they got smoked by Optic afterwards. So this team's now becoming like kind of day-to-day, and it's becoming abundantly clear that for whatever reason, a team of players like Cilium, Simp, and Abizi cannot figure out the teamwork and the communication issues that are preventing them from getting better in respawn. There are series like LAG where they finally win a fortress, they look good, and they play the same map the next day against Optic, and they're blowing P3s. Like, I just don't understand what's preventing this team. And I know people are human beings. Like, you're not going to be perfect every day. But we're now like, what? It's May 8th. You've been practicing this game for now half a year. I don't understand how this team kind of blows basic setups in matches. And these are not rookie players. Like, these are veterans. There are a lot of champs rings on this team. Every person on this team has won a chip. You've got multiple people on this team that have won 2. And they can't get basic teamwork down that the other top teams can. And the reason they're staying in Sunday regulars these days is because they just grind out these S&Ds. So I don't know what they got to do to improve on respawn. I don't know what issues preventing them from overcoming that hump, because if they can't, it's going to be another year where they get second or third, and it's like another massive what if. This team, if they can just get good, and I mean this with all sincerity, like, they don't have to be the best hardpoint or control team in the game. They've just got to be like solidly a 60% winner in that game mode, and they're going to win events because their S&D when they're on is really good. They play a really good style. But right now they're at a massive crossroads, and the matches that they have coming up, Vegas, London, and Boston. Vegas is very interesting to me. I think that's a series that they could potentially lose. London's a W, and then Boston, we'll see. I don't even know if they played Boston online at all this season. They're like 1-1 against Boston this season. They lost him in the first major, the first online qualifier, literally the first event match of the season. And then did they play him at all again online? They played at the major, and FAZE beat them in major 2 at home in front of the crowd. So they never actually played online in a real match. So I could see FAZE going 3 or 3, 2 or 3 again. But I think this team really needs to try and find out a way to kind of run the table for the rest of the matches here and get a lot of positive momentum going into Toronto, because they've struggled to beat Thieves and struggled to beat OPTIC recently. Well, OPTIC in the last 2 years, let's be honest. But anyway, that's my thoughts on FAZE. Solidly third. I think the rest of this list, looking back on it, makes sense. You know, I was talking about at the beginning of this video that potential contenders is usually like a logjam, and I've just basically taken a hacksaw to it, and there's 2 teams left there. But almost the way this splits in my mind is you got OPTIC and Thieves, and then FAZE, and then Toronto, and then New York, and then Boston, and then these 3 teams, and these 3 teams. Like, I can't add like 17 tiers to this list, because I feel like teams are starting to kind of separate themselves. And going online here for the rest of this, we've got some teams with very interesting schedules. And I think the team that could potentially move up the most is Vegas. You know, this is a team that's posed, I think, to potentially make the kind of run we saw in New York at Major 4 last year. So I'm excited to see what happens over the next couple of weeks. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of the video. Like, if you enjoyed, we'll have more recap content and a couple more things this week. So stick around for that. And as always, guys, we'll see you on the next video.